What's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, you are back after my very shuffled travel schedule. How are we feeling?
Feeling great, man. Feeling great. Connor is a very private Instagram, but he posted just the most adorable pictures I've ever seen out in Chicago, some summertime shy. You really deserve that. You've been busting your butt. I know you've been going through a lot physically, mentally, dealing with myself. So I'm glad that you're, among other things, right? Did you get some of the famous Chicago pizza we discussed?
Yes, I did. Night one. We had Lou Malnati's. My mom. This is always the dilemma, and I'm sure for those of you that live, out of state, or you just it's a little bit more difficult to get home. You have this dilemma when you're home of, do I request the thing that my mom makes the absolute best, which in my family, which has a lot more Italian in it than what I look like and what my last name is and all that stuff, surprisingly. The thing in my family is my grandma's spaghetti. My grandma's spaghetti is known. The recipe's passed down. It's this big deal when I come home. And so it's
when you were doing your first interview, you were throwing up your grandma's spaghetti, 8 Mile.
Exactly. And my mom tries to claim it, and I'll kind of correct her a little bit. Be like, is that your spaghetti or is that grandma's spaghetti? And I'm just saying, I love you, Mom, and it's the best, but still. And so it's always this dilemma. Do I request my mom's spaghetti, my grandma's spaghetti, correcting myself, or do I request Lou Malnati's? Because Lou Malnati's, look, that's the death Romeo. That's what I'm requesting. So we had some extended family over that first night, and I was able to get that out of the way. Ended up getting a little bit of Portillo's fix. Had a cake shake one of those nights as well. We made it happen, and still got to have some of my mom's food as well that she makes whenever I'm home. But it was a great weekend. Unfortunately, the travel was just couldn't have been worse. And I'm sure anybody that's listening to this that had to deal with travel across the Southeast in the first part of the week, it was brutal, man. Absolutely brutal. Those two, getting 2 flights canceled. And I recorded, actually the interview that I recorded with Shahan was right before we were about to leave for our 3rd flight. And that ended up happening just fine. But yeah, it was a long day. Claire, by the end of it, was just get me home anywhere but an airport. Finally made it home at 1:30 a.m. Tuesday going into Wednesday, after the travel day started about 12 hours earlier. So we're here.
Pause right there. Remember, flashback to what, 2 years, 3 years ago we started doing this, and we were talking about the Orlando airport. And we were like, man, the Orlando airport, there's just all these crying babies. It's such a mess. Look how far we've come. Now you're the dad with the dreary eyes, the crying baby at MCO, and you're like, get me out of here.
Here's the thing. My baby's not crying because she wants to go to Disney. My baby's crying because she's 14 months old. Yeah. And she's been out of her routine for the last week. Yeah. And it's way past her bedtime. Eventually she fell asleep on the plane. We made it work. But there was a while there where, it was rough. It was really rough. And here's the thing. Didn't even have to spend much time at the Orlando airport. We connected in Houston. And the problem with the Orlando airport, and this speaks to why it is the worst airport on planet Earth. There is not a second. I don't want to hear it, Atlanta people. I don't want to hear that Hartsfield is worse. I spent more than enough time at that airport to tell you MCO is so much worse. If you have ever flown into Orlando past 10 p.m., I guarantee you will have some sort of holdup because they didn't realize you were coming into that gate. Every single time. It's at least a half hour. Oh, you know what? The crew didn't realize that you guys were flying into that gate. There was a gate change, and we're waiting for them to be able to come on board and figure this out. But just sit tight. And then they turn off the AC or whatever they do in planes in those moments. And when you're in the back row with a 14-month-old baby who's crying her head off, and it's past midnight, just get me home. It's the worst thing. And I would rather be anywhere else on Earth than the Orlando airport. Anywhere.
You start thinking to yourself, you just see those viral videos of people freaking out when their plane stuck. It's would I rather be in jail than on this plane on the tarmac? Well, there's air conditioning in jail. If I get thrown off the plane.
We had a flight attendant come by and she gave us her personal fan, which was a super nice move. I've never had a flight attendant do that. But Claire's sitting there sweating, and it's terrible. How in these moments is it always, you know what? We can't really cool the plane the way that we hope to while we're working on this phalange. I know it's a Friends reference, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I hate it. I just hate it. I'd rather be anywhere else. I hate those moments so much.
Well, yeah, welcome back. Welcome back. I was able, like, it's funny, I find out. I was like, what's it called? The crap, or whatever the Windows thing that messed up the flights. I'm not, an expert on that, but on the way out of Dallas, like, we got the beginning of that, right? And I was like kind of being a diva about flights anyway on the way out, but I was like, something about this isn't lining up. Like, my flight's a little bit too late. Like, the one I booked, I need to change airports, I need to change that. So I ended up booking a Southwest flight, and I'm talking about, like, plane taking off as the scene is exploding in the movie behind me, because everybody else that I knew that weekend, we had people get stuck at WNBA All-Star. We had people, like, thankfully, to the people of Southwest, I owe you an apology. I was not familiar with your game. I think I said this on here previously, but flying lately, man, has been rough. I don't know what the through line is here. It's not like a single airport problem. It's not. It just is what it is. So I'm glad to have you back in one piece, and hopefully, you can remember the happy times and not just the feeling like you're in some type of a refugee situation as they had your baby who's overheated a fan. That's so scary, man.
Yeah, like I felt bad because I told my mom, I'm like, everything's been great, and Chicago was fantastic, but when you hit that point where you've had 2 flights canceled, you've had to pay so much additional money, where you're just like, just get me home. I just want to be back in my routine, and so we're back, and that's what we're going to do today. Is we're going to talk some football. We got a lot of stuff to get to, a lot of stuff to get to. DL Walker is going to join us in a little bit. Great convo with the Kentucky defensive lineman. And then we're going to end with a Jersey story from my extended weekend in Chicago. But first, Will, I don't want to say the pod curse is back, but yeah, it's back. It's back. Man, I feel so bad. CJ Baxter is out for the year. It took literally hours for one of my bold predictions to go up in smoke. And I guess it doesn't technically count as hours, because when was the pod that we did about the SEC leading rusher trying to predict that? Like back in April or something. Yeah. So it got a little bit of juice, a little bit of life. But yeah, CJ Baxter, unfortunately, the guy that I predicted would be the SEC's leading rusher. He has a torn PCL and LCL, as MR Richardson reported. That means he is likely out for the year, 6-9 months. That means, barring a Will Muschamp like timetable for a return from a knee injury, we will not be seeing CJ Baxter in a Texas uniform this season. That's a bummer. Major, major bummer. So far, I would argue that's the first fall camp injury that we could be talking about going into a game that's played in late December or early January. Okay? Like fair, like first big time kind of casualty that you're, maybe that's going to impact the national championship. I don't say that lightly. I really don't, because I thought about this too. Like, are we sure that a running back injury can be that significant? Because when was the last time that we really saw that play out with the national championship, with the college football playoff? And then I remembered, oh yeah, we saw that last year. We saw that last year. Texas and Washington are playing in a game in which Dylan Johnson gets hurt at the end of that Texas game. And Dylan Johnson had a really impressive year after transferring from Mississippi State. But I thought him getting hurt late in that Texas game impacted the game plan that Washington rolled out against Michigan. If he's healthy against Michigan, they're still probably not winning that football game. But it definitely at least impacted it. And I didn't necessarily think that Washington had its full offensive arsenal because of the lack of depth that they had at tailback behind him. But,
and flip that too really quick, because Blake Corum obviously got hurt the previous year against Ohio State, and then we got to see NCAA cover athlete Donovan Edwards make his. So it really is either or, right? You either, whatever the story you want to go with, either you respond to it or you don't. But I think we've seen, because they beat Ohio State and ended that streak without their best player at the time.
Yeah, and who knows, like, if he's making the difference in that TCU game, because turnovers were obviously so costly in that. But yeah, it's a fair point. And
look, he was out for that game too. That's a really good point. So yeah, they overcame one and they didn't overcome another one. So yeah, it's all in there.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if you're healthy at that position, that's a good thing. That's a really positive thing. And I'm not saying that Texas lost as a result of its injuries in its backfield, because obviously the Jonathan Brooks injury was something that opened the door for Baxter and Jaden Blue to both play in that semifinal game against Washington. And they played well, but they both had costly fumbles that they lost in the second half of that game. And they got more significant work because Jonathan Brooks had that late season injury. And then those two guys end up kind of giving us a glimpse of what the future was going to be. And I suppose you could go back and forth and say, like, all right, well, Baxter was originally expected to be RB1 as a true freshman starting off last year, and then he gets hurt. That opens the door for Jonathan Brooks. So really, who was opening the door for who? I don't know. I still thought that despite the fumble, Baxter looked excellent in that game. And as I referenced the other day, and probably several other times this offseason, an 18-year-old getting 100 scrimmage yards in a playoff game is super rare. And for me, that was a major positive working in his favor. He just turned 19. And in my mind, the former number one running back recruit was poised to have a monster season in this pivotal year one for Texas in the SEC. The yards after contact, that's like maybe my favorite stat with a running back. I think that's so significant. It was going to be a factor for him. It just was. And it's kind of the answer to the question, like, or at least it's part of the answer to the question, is Texas SEC ready? Well, when you have guys like CJ Baxter, it helps us think that you were at least getting there. And it's not that shifty backs can't pop in the SEC, but think about this, Will. Like, usually a leading rusher in the SEC, he generates a bit more pop and he looks a little bit more like CJ Baxter than a Jaden Blue type, which I'm not trying to take anything away from Jaden Blue, but he's different than CJ Baxter. He just is. I think Texas's original plan was going to be utilize Blue as more of a change of pace type back. He was better in the passing game than Baxter was. So that's a positive. Maybe not quite like a Quinshon Judkins, Ulysses Bentley type thing, but maybe some shades of that. So who knows? Who knows what that's going to break down to be this year? I just feel very confident saying that Jaden Blue is going to average more than the 11 to 13 touches per game that he was getting after that Brooks injury late last season. Maybe Sark just goes, you know what? Screw it. Let's see what we got. Let's see if we can make this a Bijan Najee type workload for Jaden Blue. He's the most
two very regular guys.
Two totally normal guys. Everybody just he's just another one of those.
Another one of those. Yeah,
no big deal. Who knows? I mean, and that workload is significant, like 21 to 23 touches per game. That there could be a world in which Sark plays that card because the depth behind him is a major question. Trey Wisner is their, I guess, second string back now. He was almost exclusively a special teams player. Shout out to Nash Talks Texas on Twitter because I went back and watched all of his highlights from last year. Played only 22 offensive snaps, 12 carries compared to 173 special team snaps, which explains why half of that minute 52 video is plays that he made on special teams. So take that for what it is. And I'm talking like gunner tackles, not like I broke through and had this massive return or something like that. So a little bit different. I'm going to make a bold prediction, say that's going to have to change, probably, specific to this Texas offense. Sark is probably going to have to get some run from these true freshmen, Jarrett Gibson, Christian Clark coming in. Gibson was an IMG kid, number 9 running back in the 24 class, according to the composite rankings. Maybe he's going to be the answer to Texas's question about the yards after contact, the thing that I thought CJ Baxter was going to really bring to the table. But also, as much as, how can I say this without taking a dig at Billy Napier? As much as pass protection should it be the determining factor with snap count for your running backs, I do wonder if Sark might be a little bit hesitant to roll out true freshmen in pass pro to protect Ewers when we know what Quinn Ewers' injury history is. So that's a factor. That's part of this as well. That's one impact of losing someone like Baxter, who, even if he wasn't necessarily some elite pass pro guy, he's still a guy that has real reps in that system and knows what it means to see live edge rushers that are getting off the ball and throwing different things at you. And he's been asked to pass protect in those spots. They had depth. They had depth at running back. This was not a team that needed to go into the portal and be like, hey, let's go after a Logan Diggs or something like that, with what Ole Miss did, trying to replace a Quinshon Judkins. They weren't in a situation like what Kentucky was in, where they really felt, hey, we need to be able to make a difference there. And look, let's remember that even if you feel good about the Texas running back room post CJ Baxter injury, it's early August, and Texas is hoping to play 16 or 17 games this year in this new expanded playoff. I don't know that you can operate the way that Sark did with Bijan and Najee. And I'm saying it Bijan, by the way, because remember last year he came out and said, actually, his name is pronounced Bijan, not Bijan. So if you feel like I'm pronouncing it that way, that's why I'm still kind of in between those two things. It's definitely
Like
Najee, though.
Ashan.
Yeah.
Look,
It's like
guys,
an
we got
Ashan
enough stuff we got to learn with these new teams.
thing. I
Cody,
know.
stop changing the stuff that we already do. That's all I got to say.
Just don't say Najee. It's not Najee.
Najee.
Yeah, it's Najee. It's Najee Harris. Like
Yeah.
he said it a million times before. Look, here's the thing. I think it's going to be really difficult for these playoff contenders to operate within that frame of trying to have a back that gets the 20 plus carries per game on a weekly basis. And I think more teams will get away from that more than they will lean into it because they realize the season just got longer and it's going to be that much tougher. That's why Ohio State was willing to say, "Oh, Quinshon Judkins, you're in the portal. We'll pay your price. Yeah, we love Travion Henderson, but we love you too. And we feel like if we're going to have a long season, we need multiple guys that are going to be doing this." Texas looked like it had that, and that conversation obviously changes now, or at least it's questionable in this early part of fall camp. And let's also remember, like, even when Najee was given all that work in 2020, it's because Sark was looking at a shortened season because of COVID. They played 13 games that year. Very, very different than what's going to be asked this upcoming season. The good news for Texas, and maybe the bad news for the rest of the SEC, who's hoping to maybe see Texas kind of get knocked down a peg, the schedule is still so forgiving. The schedule didn't change. 2 matchups against SEC teams that won at least 8 games last year, one of which wasn't even in the SEC because obviously that was Oklahoma. Speaking of Oklahoma, that's a game where you struggled with turnovers last year. Yes, they still moved the ball. They still had a lot of success on the offensive side of the ball, so I'm not dismissing that. But maybe we were going to see Sark lean into a different approach against Oklahoma. And maybe we were going to try and see Texas have a more run-focused approach against a relatively unproven Oklahoma defensive line. And CJ Baxter would have been a really big part of that. TBD on kind of what all that looks like. Maybe same thing with that Georgia matchup. I feel a whole lot worse about that prediction right now. I'm telling you, okay? I know I'm already out there with the Texas is 12-0 thing, and now I'm looking at the Georgia matchup going, buddy, I don't really like Texas's backfield to be able to have major success breaking off chunks of yardage against Georgia's defense without CJ Baxter, because we know you don't beat Georgia by being one-dimensional, nor do you beat Georgia with a bunch of shifty backs. The guys who had 100 rushing yards against Georgia the last 3 seasons, it's Cody Schrader. That's it. That's the list. That's the guy. Cody Schrader, great college player. TBD on if him being undrafted in the NFL is going to mean anything. More thoughts on that in a little bit. 10th in America in yards after contact.
Yep.
That's the type of back that you need if you're going to go toe-to-toe with a team like Georgia. Or you got to have like a Jalen Milroe that can also do those sorts of things. And, even if you don't have a traditional backfield with a guy that's going to, be a true bruiser.
You just gave me the war flashbacks to Schrader that you just followed that with Milroe, huh? You just watching these guys bounce off of the LSU defenders like, hey, nobody. I'm sure half of those yards after contact happened in each LSU game.
Yeah. How many tackles did Cody Schrader break against LSU alone?
Just about 20. Yeah.
Yeah. A whole lot. Georgia also, in case you forgot, for whatever reason, hasn't lost a regular season game in 3 seasons. That game is just so much tougher without a guy like CJ Baxter. But what's also working in Texas's favor, and why this isn't necessarily some massive game changer in terms of their overall outlook, the surroundings were a big reason why I picked CJ Baxter to lead the SEC in rushing. You've got 4 or 5 starters back on that offensive line. You've got a starting quarterback returning as one of the preseason Heisman Trophy favorites. And even if the top-end receiver talent isn't what it was with Mitchell, with Worthy, you're still not about to load the box against Quinn Ewers, especially with how Sark can scheme these guys open. So that's a positive. And remember, this is an offense that last year was 13th in America in yards per play. That's good. That's really good. We could definitely see Blue or maybe Gibson is going to step up and just become another great back under Sark, who again has earned a lot of blind faith at that spot with having the first running back selected in 3 of the last 4 NFL drafts. That's why I don't want to necessarily back off of my pick of Texas making it to the SEC championship and reaching the college football playoff. This shouldn't be a 2 to 3 win change all of a sudden. That's the difference with Texas now compared to Texas 2 or 3 years ago. If Bijan God, it's so weird to say it like that. It really is. You say it so like one way for so long, and then you try and train your brain to pivot, and you're just like, nope, that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
If Bijan had suffered an injury like this, it would have been fair to question the surroundings and question Texas's upside. But Texas is, in theory, in a different place, which was really already shown last year by the fact that in the post-Bijan era, it broke through, made the playoff, had its best season in 14 years, despite the fact that Ewers missed multiple games. If I picked Texas to win a title, however, I wouldn't be feeling as good about that. The margin for error to win a national championship in this new system, it might not be like the 100-meter at the Olympics. Shout out Noah Lyles, the lean scene around the world. Probably not as close as that, but it could absolutely come down to not having a guy like Baxter at your disposal. Go ask Bama fans what it's like to take away Jameson Williams in the second half of a national championship. All right? Like these things can come down to one guy getting hurt at the wrong time. So yes, I think it's fair to say this impacts Texas's upside. It doesn't necessarily feel like it'll be a season derailer. If Texas is truly back, we talked about how it needs to have a multi-season deal. And one injury like this shouldn't be the thing that holds you back from being one of the best teams in the sport. It's a bummer, but it shouldn't be the end of the world. Will, before we pick a new leading rusher in the SEC for this upcoming season, hopefully don't jinx them and get them hurt with a season-ending injury by the time that we finish recording this podcast. Thoughts on Baxter, the impact, how that can impact the SEC, the playoff, all those things.
I mean, it's so tough, right? Because as I'm going back through this, and this is a theme that we're going to probably continue to hit on because, guys, the all SEC running back team is going to be so like the most fascinating we've ever seen ever, and maybe will ever see, because there are these new teams, but all of the great running backs, and there are a couple, are these smaller backs like you were just talking about. And so it's like, yeah, could you see Etienne or Jarquez Hunter or like one of those guys being a leading rusher? Maybe, but you started off with that where it's like it's hard to see that, and then you see this guy. So obviously when an injury like this happens the first time, it's like your heart goes out to the kid. Like you see, he's just 19, getting his career started. It's terrible to see that. The second part of it is I feel like, dang, that prediction actually made more sense than I even gave it credit for at the time, because, yeah, to your point, this was a unit. This is a big guy nicknamed C4 from Lakeland, Florida, Edgewater in Orlando. And right down the street. And this is a guy that you go, wow, this is what you want to, the Clydesdale you want to ride into the SEC in a year where there's smaller running backs, right? There's all this stuff going on. Number one running back in the class by the two recruiting sites people respect. So, yeah, I think it sucks because you could see, this is a guy that, first year he had 800 scrimmage yards, right? And it was all lining up to be, okay, this is the massive breakout. We have, to your point, Sark has these great running backs that have come through, great O-line at Texas. This guy was highly recruited. He's already popped, in these big games. And this was going to be a great kind of pick by you, honestly. But now, he's off the board. So, yeah, I hate to see that. And like I said, it's just going to be fascinating going forward because another guy is now off the list. So, yeah, I mean, that being said, oh man, my safe answer was always going to be Montreal Johnson, and I feel like a coward for saying that. I mean, the other big backs, I mean, yeah, I hate to discredit anyone. I'm sure there's guys I'm leaving out. I mean, it's like it's hard to find those guys. Another one, obviously, we're talking about backs who went down. I don't think like a Josh Williams is going to do anything. So yeah, I think it would have to be, if you're going for that type of guy, right, like a Montreal Johnson, because he's going to get the carries. We prove the coaching staff loves him. Not to harp on that, right? But I don't think that, knowing Kirby and the way that he does, like Kirby is not really done post, Nick Chubb and those guys. And it feels like he started off with these just huge backs. And since then, you're talking about Milton, those guys, it's been a lot more of a stable, right? So it's a lot easier to imagine Etienne as a role running back where it's like, oh, you're going to be the Reggie Bush in this offense, like what the Saints used to have with Pierre and Reggie, and you're going to come in on screen passes, third downs, stuff like that. You're going to play a lot, but you're not going to get 30 carries a game, right? So it's hard to pick the Hugh Freeze offense too, especially at this point.
Hold on real quick. Kai hit on, you brought up something with Montreal Johnson that I think people are going to want, like they're going to want to dig into. And I'll get to those. I'm going to get to those other backs too. And like why,
for sure.
Like, kind of revisiting their case for this now that it's kind of up for grabs. But the workload with Montreal Johnson now that Trevor Etienne is at Georgia. Mm-hmm. If you were told, hey, what do you think? What do you think is like the max workload for him? Because we saw him have a really good first season with Billy Napier at Louisiana. And
Mm-hmm.
then after this freshman season, he follows him to Florida. And we know what it's been these first 2 years. And does that all of a sudden make him this guy that Billy is saying, you know what, you're worth 20, 21 carries per game? Because history has shown us that if you're going to be the SEC's leading rusher, it's so much about opportunity. And it's so
Mm-hmm.
much about what it looks like in that backfield, which, TBD on some of the options. I've heard some of the things about other backs that have been able to emerge. And maybe there is going to be a Trevor Etienne replacement, a true Trevor Etienne replacement there. But I don't have the faith that they're going to be consistent week in, week out on that offensive line. It's just like it's been such a yo-yo unit with that. I guess year one they were better than they were last year with that. But man, I'm telling you, if you think I'm discounting Montreal Johnson, go look at the Florida game log last year and look at the game log, because that
Mm-hmm.
shows their rushing totals game to game. And it is as far and wide as there can possibly be. And to me, that would scare me to death if I'm like, oh, I'm picking this guy who's going to be the SEC's leading rusher, and he could very well have games in which he has 8 carries for 18 yards. Like,
Yeah.
that's not crazy. And so that's why I won't be picking Montreal Johnson as my pick.
Yeah, no, I get it. I really do get it. And like that's kind of the thing. I'm blanking on this guy's name. I'm sorry. The transfer that Kentucky got, I believe he's from Georgia State.
Yeah, he's got a long last name. Look
Yeah.
it up on our lads and try and pronounce it.
Yeah, like because it's really just about your offense. Like there's really just not like again, Baxter was kind of that guy. Like that's like his talent will make his team play him and give him these carries. So yeah, like that's another like safe one. And again, sorry to be this guy that doesn't know the names, but we're getting down to like our again 5th, 6th, 7th guys in a class that was kind of unclear at the top. So yeah, I think that looking at this, man, it's just, I think that someone from Kentucky will emerge. I'll put it to you like that. Mark Stoops does not really like to do the stable thing as much. And he's an old school coach. Those guys are rare. Like if Les Miles were still in the SEC, I'd go whatever that guy has. I'll take his running back. So same deal there. I think that whoever the emerging star in Kentucky is, they like to kind of ride that guy. That being said, it seems a lot easier as you kind of look back at last year to look at Hunter, honestly. I think that he does have a little bit more carries than I was imagining. I think that in the offense, I hate to say it this way, but it's true. I don't think it could really get worse. I think that it's going to get better. It's just going to get better. That's a nice way to say it. So I think that given that he was kind of in that weird role where the defense has been focused on the guy's whole career, right? So like that is not going to change. It's same deal as what Etienne had at Florida, where it's like, hey, when you're on the field, 2 guys are looking at you. Like 2 guys are looking. It's not just the one guy. It's the whole defense. It's like, huh? And so, point being, I think I'm gonna go Jarquez Hunter, man. Honestly,
only problem, he's a fine candidate. He's a fine candidate. I'm not gonna say that's an impossibility. I should have had this number last time when I kind of outlined why I like the case for Baxter, and I kind of circled around this, but I don't think I brought this exact number to the table. Hugh Freeze has had 11 seasons as a head coach. He's had 1,000-yard rusher. That's it.
He's had only good receivers and tight ends. He has none of those right now. He's had rarely good running backs.
He's got good. He's got better receivers.
He has one.
They're hoping to go 3 deep. This should be, in theory, not just Cam Coleman, but the Keandre Lambert-Smith edition was very.
Is one of them Coy Moore?
No. Like very, very new look group there. So I'll push back on that. But
yeah,
that's the thing is like Frankie Hickson at Liberty 2019 is their only 1,000-yard rusher during Hugh Freeze's time as a head coach. And that was year 1 when Freeze wanted to get Malik Willis eligible, but couldn't because of the NCAA rules. And he wasn't necessarily running his preferred offense, which was something that we talked about a lot last year, that this was ideally not the way that Hugh Freeze was going to try and move the chains. But the only thing seemingly that Auburn could do on occasion was run the football. And if the thinking is that Freeze is going to be more hands-on with the offense this year, and if he's going to really take over those play calling duties, I don't know that means all of a sudden giving Hunter this 250 carry workload, and especially when we're hearing a lot of things in fall camp about the backs, about Alston, about Cobb, who have stepped in, and that's just been kind of more of the Freeze MO. Hunter is a good pick for this question. Like, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever based on ability and all those different things. But does history suggest that that's working in his favor? I would say probably not as much as somebody else that I have in mind.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you there. And it's like you can't even lean on the Alabama thing because we truly don't know. Like, that could be with that quarter. We haven't really seen that style of quarterback with DeBoer either. So it kind of goes to Milroe was 6th in carries last year in the SEC. So that's why an Alabama running back has not been discussed so far, because if you're using that player correctly, you're not having a bell cow running back. You're having, an option at most, right? So point being, like, I feel like I just keep finding no's. So I'm going to officially go Hunter, but it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, dang it, if Hunter is like 3rd, because let me answer it this way. It's a guy we're probably not going to be talking about. Let's put it to you like that. Keep some mystery.
That's possible. All right. So let me give you some more no's, and maybe I should go with, I should mention the Bama thing, because Justice Haynes is a guy that's got a lot of expectations. Jam Miller as well. But again, you kind of already hit on it. Like, Milroe takes away from some of that rushing, and in a DeBoer offense, yes, I do think that they'll run the football more than Washington did, just because their personnel is more conducive to that.
Right.
But all of a sudden, producing the SEC's leading rusher, I don't necessarily know that scheme yields that type of result. Am I overthinking it or underthinking it by kind of dismissing Jaden Blue from this conversation? I don't know. It's super tempting to just go, in Sark I trust, and his back will end up being that guy. But I feel like I just need to see a bit more of him from this level. And if he was already being passed on the depth chart by Baxter and by, Brooks last year obviously emerged and he was a stud, but what exactly was the thing that was preventing them from giving him that opportunity last year? Maybe that's just a little bit too far in the back of my mind, and I'll change that opinion a month into the season. I'm not going to rule that out, but I'm not going to pick him kind of as that default guy.
And let me go even more conspiratorial there. In the age of the transfer portal, what you really don't want is a bell cow running back emerging when you have a guy like C.J. Baxter who is going to be coming back at some point, because then you have a weird situation where it's hard to manage those two guys,
Yeah, Texas didn't have to go to the portal.
Right.
Didn't have to.
But I'm saying, like, let's say Blue breaks out and Baxter comes back, and they're like, and Blue's like, dude, I just led this team in rushing. I led the conference in rushing. Who's this Baxter guy? And Baxter is like, all right, I'm out of here. So as a coach, you don't really want that. You'd rather have kind of like, all right, buddy, we're keeping your seat warm. Hope you're healing up nice,
If Blue pops, he can go to the NFL.
That's also true. That's also very true. Yeah.
Whereas Baxter can come back, or you can just find a way to be able to make that work in this day and age. But you're right. It is kind of like a little bit of like a balancing thing, especially if you're giving this guy all this work and he says, I want to come back to school. Or alternatively, if he comes back and then it's the Quinshon Judkins thing and says, I want this. And maybe you're like, no, we have CJ Baxter. We don't necessarily need to give you that. We appreciate what you did, but we can move on from you in a different sort of way. So that's possible as well.
I hate to mention this guy's name, but a certain Darius G that used to play at LSU, when Leonard Fournette went down, he popped, right? And then it was a weird situation because Leonard came back and it was like, oh, we got both of y'all. Who's the running back here?
Darius Guice led the SEC in rushing in 2016. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Isn't that crazy? A year in which Leonard Fournette was an active player. Darius Guice led the SEC in rushing. Pretty amazing. Gavin Sawchuk is a guy that I kind of thought about. I do think. Look, funny name. I don't know that SC fans know the name very well. Because
no, I'm laughing at like we're like talking about some dudes at this point. This is so funny that this is like the greatest position, like the old school, like Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, it's so crazy, man.
It really is. It is such a unique thing in the SEC this year.
No.
But that's what makes it fun, is that it's there's a lot of room for interpretation here, and it's very much pick your whatever sort of preference you have. But SC fans need to know more about Gavin Sawchuk, because that guy had 5 games to end last season where he takes over the starting role as they dealt with injuries in the backfield, and then he had nothing but 100-yard games, averaged 123 rushing yards during that stretch. I'm not picking him though because I worry about that new look offensive line. I don't know that it's going to all of a sudden spit out a leading rusher year one in a 16-team SEC. I don't necessarily know that it's going to be quite that good. So I'll hold off on that. I already told you some of my reservations with Hunter. Rocket Sanders, if you
don't do it,
I'm not going to do it. I'm not.
Don't fall for it.
I will say, if you told me, Will, if you had a crystal ball sitting in front of you, which, by the way, Crystal Ball series, we're getting going with that on SaturdayDownSouth.com, shameless plug. That starts next week, where we go through every single game that an SEC team plays this year, record predictions, storylines, all that stuff. Check that out. If you had a crystal ball and you told me, Connor, Lenora Sellers, Horace Grant 2.0.
Yeah. Okay.
If you told me this guy is going to be a middle of the pack SEC quarterback, if you told me that the offensive line that was thrown into the fire last year because of all the different injuries that they had, if you told me that what Shane Beamer said at Media Days was going to be 100% accurate and they were going to be better for it, and you told me that Rocket was going to be healthy for an entire season, if you just gave me all those things and said all three of those boxes would be checked, I'd say, all right, sign me up. But I worry that one of those landmines will be stepped on this year. Yeah. And that's all it'll take to derail Rocket from being the leading rusher in the SEC, which, by the way, for all the things that I think Beamer has done well at South Carolina, I've been pretty adamant from the jump that they have not been good enough in the trenches on either side of the ball. They have yet to have a rusher, a runner, I should say, gain 710 rushing yards in a season. That's not great. You're going to need double that to win an SEC rushing title. So that's a little bit tougher. If you have a scheme change or something like that, all right, that's a little bit different, but we're not exactly talking about that. So
I'll say this too with Sellers. I think you're totally right. Like it's funny because I was like picking a random team that said South Carolina. And I go, oh, here we go. I forgot. It's so point being because like we've literally seen this movie. I hate to be this guy, but it's like, yeah, and I have the same reservation for trying to pick UCF season. It was KJ because I'm like, you guys were really good, and then you weren't, and I don't know what happened. The O line was bad, but that doesn't make any sense either. So point being, like we've already seen, a hurt Rocket Sanders, who she's hurt now. Like when Bieber was like, we really haven't seen dude in terms of like he's still hurt. I was like, okay, like I'm already out on this. I just because like you said, the line's bad. If we're talking about Florida's line for Montrell Johnson, this line's worse probably, honestly. And the thing is about Lenora Sellers, think back to the fill-in games that Jalen Milroe had before he was like the starter when Bryce Young was there, right? Like whenever they had found success, it was like, okay, you're a tank. We know we can turn you into a tank. We're going to develop you as a passer as your career goes on. But right now you're a tank. That's what I feel like Laura Sellers is. And so that's the problem where it's like the thing he can probably do well is be a tank. We even saw that in the spring game, right? Where it's like when he doesn't know what to do, when the line breaks down, when Beamer is like, this guy's getting a little bit cold. Let me try to get him something going. It's going to be a lot of QB run. So yeah, I think that's the key is that it's not that they even have like a modern Milroe or Daniels that had a ton of rushing attempts and yards last year. It's they have a guy who they're not sure can consistently throw the football. And when that happens, you see the safety start to creep in. And to get that guy going, you got to get rushing attempts. You can't just have him throwing into blitzes because the line's not going to help him,
Exactly. And they don't have – not having Xavier Legette too. Not having a guy that's going to at least make you think, oh, man, you got to really make sure that you got eyes on him in the secondary. You're right. The teams might just decide let's load the box against South Carolina and let's let somebody else try and beat us and just kind of figure it out from there. So, yeah, we won't go with Rocket Sanders. And to your point that you brought up before with Trevor Etienne, I'm not going to go with him, even though I think he's got 2019 DeAndre Swift upside. I think that's on the table. But think about this, and you did a good job of mentioning this. Georgia has played in all of these extra games with Kirby, whether it's SEC championship or playoff games, whatever. Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift. I'll throw Zamir White in there as well. Guy who's expected to be a starting running back in the NFL. They all had multiple seasons under Kirby. None of them led the SEC in rushing. None of them. Chubb was the only guy under Kirby who even finished in the top 4 in the SEC in rushing during that entire time. And he had 3 more games than Kerryon Johnson, who obviously got hurt at the end of that season. And yet Nick Chubb still didn't win the SEC rushing title. Awesome. One of the best backs that we've seen in the 21st century in the SEC. And still he came up short of that. So I'm not going to pick Trevor Etienne, despite the fact that I love the player. I think he has an awesome season. I think he's set up for great success running behind that offensive line, but I'm not going to quite pull the trigger and go that far because I think maybe his upside is a little bit more capped by the situation. Georgia playing in blowouts, you get it.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think we're pretty. I mean, I'm sure some fan base will be like, "You forgot our guy," and I'm like, "Buddy, again, pitch me. Who will be the SEC leading guard? Please, if you have a guy that you like, we're not leaving him off on purpose. We've talked about 15 guys. If you were like, hey, there's this guy from this local community college, man. He transferred to Mizzou. He's going to be Schrader 2.0. Please tell me, because I would love to root for him."
Speaking of that, so that's what I'm going to go with. Will, that's what I'm going to go with. Not a community college guy who transferred to Mizzou who got his offer because of a bribe with not a bribe, but a deal with a booster over a cocktail. But I'm going to go with Marcus Carroll to be the SEC's leading rusher this year. If you don't know the name, I think you will in a very short matter of time. Coming over from Georgia State, he is. I don't want to say he's expected to be Cody Schrader 2.0 because that diminishes what Cody Schrader did as one of the best players that Mizzou I think has ever had on the offensive side of the ball. I think he was that good. And I understand, and part of my reservation originally with picking Marcus Carroll to lead the SEC in rushing was because I still think that Nate Noel is going to carve out a role. He's coming over from App State. But last season, what was the big difference with the Mizzou offense? The passing game found an identity with a new play caller in Kirby Moore. Brady Cook took the next step. Luther Burden III was incredible. Your boy Weiss became this reliable veteran that they could trust. Yeah. And you say that every single time, and I'm always like, is that from somewhere? I don't know if it is. It's just from Will. Exactly. All those things happened, and Mizzou finally had the passing game that it so desperately lacked far too often in the post-Drew Lock era. And yet, Cody Schrader won the SEC rushing title by 469 yards. That's, without question. Speaking of Schrader, I thought it was a joke that he went undrafted. Okay, I'm on record saying that. We talked about that after the draft. You can't tell me that guy just lacks juice and it was only because of the scheme. But at the same time, that's basically what the entire NFL said about his draft stock. They said, you're benefiting greatly from being the perfect fit in this zone running scheme. And mind you, it's not like Mizzou has just been cranking out a bunch of first-round offensive linemen who have paved the way for him, and it's this unbelievable track record. 2 day 3 offensive linemen drafted during the Eli Drinkwitz era. That's it, okay? So think about that. That's not to say that anyone who steps into Mizzou's run game is just a talentless, scheme-dependent player, the system back, whatever you want to call it. But in terms of predicting a leading rusher, I want scheme on my side, and I want it to coincide with talent and opportunity. Those are the 3 boxes that I want to check if I'm predicting something like that. Marcus Carroll led FBS with 22.8 carries per game. He hit the portal in the post-regular season window, which was 2 months before Sean Elliott, friend of the program, surprisingly stepped down at Georgia State and took an assistant job on Shane Beamer's staff at South Carolina, where he's going to be the run game coordinator. He's going to coach the tight ends. If Carroll had left after that move, different story. He could have stayed at Georgia State, where he got more work than anybody in the country. And he decided, you know what? No, I don't care if I have another season like that. I want to go to a place where I feel like I'm going to get on an even bigger stage. I'm going to have an even bigger opportunity. That's ultimately what he was going to get at Mizzou. So I'm going to bet that even if this is, as running backs coach Curtis Looper said back in the spring, even if this is a bit like 2020 Larry Roundtree, Tyler Beatty, I still think that Carroll should feast. And by the way, the discrepancy in terms of workload was still pretty significant with those two guys. We kind of go back and look at those numbers before. Tyler Beatty really got into that role in 2021. This is 2020 that we're talking about. So I think even that comp favors a Marcus Carroll in this spot. So I'm on record now. Please don't have a season-ending knee injury, Marcus Carroll, or else I'm going to feel so bad, and I'm just not going to predict anything ever.
You know what, Connor? I'm going to admit to something here because my brain is just in an absolute pretzel, and I don't want anyone to think that Connor is as stupid as me, so I want to just take a pause here. I just go about the honesty hour. I fused Marcus Carroll and Kentucky's running back. And when I
Oh,
said the Kentucky transfer from Georgia State, I was talking about Marcus Carroll. And I initially
oh,
felt stupid
okay.
for doing that. Then I realized these are the two old school coaches left, right? And Drake and Stoops that feed their guys. Both of their guys were like top 3 in rushing last year. Both of them had transfers last year, right? In Schrader and Davis.
Yep.
Both of them have transfers this year. And again, there's a kind of like a battle like Kentucky with two gentlemen whose names like we were both like, we'll see who wins before we learn this name. And furthermore, Carroll is exactly who I was thinking of. So like I said, honesty hour, hand up. But it comes down to scheme. I think you're totally right. I love that pick. I knew who Carroll was. I knew he was at Georgia State. I just thought he was the guy at Kentucky, and the Kentucky guy was at Mizzou because there's so much movement going on here. I love that pick for that exact reason. He already has and we've already talked about him. There's just so many backs moving in and out. No, we're down one in Baxter too. We got to go learn 3 more guys at Texas. But point being, yeah, I love that pick because of his history. Like you talked about, the carry is the wear and tear, and it goes back to our good friend Larry Roundtree. And we were like, look, he was like the running back version of Phillip Rivers. It was like, you watch the end of a Mizzou game, buddy, you're going to see Larry Roundtree sweating profusely. He's going to be on carry 25. He's going to have like between 100 and 150 yards, or like 80 and 150 yards, and that's going to determine how Mizzou is doing. And like that's pretty consistently, like those two coaches have been the ones who have been like, this is our running back, we are going to feed him. I actually love that pick at Mizzou. Forgive me for confusing everyone.
What if I just didn't know how to pronounce Carroll? I was like, is it Carroll? Carroll?
Yeah.
Caroy? No.
Steve Carroll?
Is it no. We brains are not in mid-season form yet. That's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But it kind of speaks to the nature of Marcus Carroll and the role that he's taking on. I'm pretty sure he wasn't even on the preseason ballot because our guy Derek Peterson, he like nudges me and is like, and I already mentioned before how Derek spent, I think, 6 hours on his preseason All SEC ballot.
Derek, man.
He's looking up. Dude. He's, and when I say this, it's not like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Derek is sitting there breaking down the PFF numbers for long snappers. So that's how seriously he took this thing. And he nudges me. He's like, "Where's Marcus Carroll on this ballot? I just did all this research on him. I think he's should be a preseason All SEC guy." Like, I don't think he's on there because he comes in as a transfer. Maybe Drink has some sort of policy with that. I never heard like why exactly that was the case, but I don't know that it's not like a rule in the SEC where if you transfer in, you can't be on the ballot. I'm pretty sure it actually just comes down to coach decisions with who's on the ballot and who's not. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure they break it down from there because like we've seen, not a lot of any guys, right? So like I'm sure there's somebody who's like, "No, come on, get out of here." But I will say that's actually the answer to a question that you asked a month ago at Media Days, which is who is the transfer who is going to get swept under the rug. We thought it would be Nick Scorton. It wasn't. He ended up on the second team. This is the guy who got swept under the rug. Like it was like, oh, you got to learn these new faces. There will be a transfer who people are not talking about. Now we are talking about him. You're so right.
Marcus Carroll's going to have a 25 carry game, and people are going to be like, wait a minute, I thought Cody Schrader graduated. Did he moved on, right? Like, no, he's still back there, still doing it. So, all right, we are officially on record with that new leading rusher in the SEC. And like I said, just stay upright, man. Just don't make me look even worse than I already feel. Please don't do that. All right, let's kick it to Deone Walker. Really enjoyed being able to chop it up with him at Media Days and then again here on our airwaves. So here's Deone. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Kentucky defensive lineman, game wrecker, whatever we want to call you. It is Deone Walker. Deone, I'm going to start with a little story here. So at SEC Media Days, I sort of ran into you in the hallway and I saw your chain. And it, by the way, it's awesome for those who haven't seen it. It's like a bear with a crown, like a crown on it with the number 0 in it, like your number. And I asked you if I could take a picture of it, and you gave me this look that it was similar to like what my daughter gives someone that's attempting to hold her for the first time. It was perfect. So I'm wondering, because this is like before your podium session and all that stuff. I'm wondering, is this guy who just has no sort of like lack of aggression in a football game, is he going to be really shy when it comes to the podium and all that stuff? And I got to say, you, Luther Burden III, and probably like Tyler Booker. You guys were my favorite guys to talk to at media days. It wasn't so bad, right? Like we're not that terrible, the media.
Yeah, we just try to make the best of it. It's a it's just so great to be there. It's a great accomplishment, and just being trusted by Coach Stoops. Hey, it's all fun.
So I think that's the best way to kind of describe your game is disruptive. Speaking of Coach Stoops, how often have you been kicked out of practice just because you're too disruptive and the offense is like, man, we can't get anything done if you're going to be like this?
Uh, Only about like two, three times, couple scrimmages, but you know, this year our O line is we fighting.
Tell me about that because it's one thing to get kicked out of practice, like stuff happens in the heat of battle. You do something wrong, and it's like, all right, maybe I grabbed a guy's face mask that I shouldn't have. Maybe coach sends me to the sideline, something like that. Is it almost a badge of honor to have a coach say you're too good right now, and you're too good for what we're trying to do?
Yeah, of course, one part of me wants to play, wants to keep going, wants to keep wreaking havoc, but the other part is like, dang, I'm really where I need to be.
So tell me what those battles have been like throughout your career. It was really well documented a couple of years ago with the offensive line, an area that, 22, you guys surprisingly struggled with that. And, to see it kind of progress where last year it improved. And I think you want to see it get even better. And it's probably a little bit of a double-edged sword for you because if you're dominating those matches every single time in practice, you're like, oh man, like I want these guys to get better. What have you kind of seen from them so far and kind of how that progression has gone?
Um, we got a bunch of guys. We got a I could say three or four leaders on our offensive line, with Eli Cox, Jack Burden, Marcus Cox, even Gerald Menzies. He's talking more. We threw him in the fire and he came out of it. So we got a bunch of guys. I can see that we turned into a well-oiled machine.
You said at media days that you were at about like 340 pounds. And I guess that was like close to a month ago. That was probably 3 weeks ago. Yeah, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it
Yeah.
was. And that you wanted to get down to about 320 pounds or 330, 325 pounds. Pass rush was a big part of that. You want to improve, get that extra second of speed. How do you feel like that's going to be able to elevate your game? How do you feel like you've made progress with that?
I feel like it's going to elevate my game a lot. My big or our big defensive line emphasis has been, you know, staying in there, anchoring down on the run. When you get those bump combos, when it is GT counter, and at this weight now, I feel like I got a good sense of that. But while still having the pass rush, I feel like I need to get my weight down, and it's going good. I'm still putting on more muscle while trying to drop the fat, so it's going great.
What'd you play at last year? Because the motor was not a question at all. I mean, I felt like I talked about that so much. Like the fact that you were at least listed at, I think, at 348, and all but once you played 50 snaps, which is just unheard of for a guy at your size. Like that just doesn't happen. So like what were you playing at? Like pretty much what was like your steadiest weight last year?
I'll say around like 335 to 340. And then later in the season, I got up to around like 345 at the most.
Is that normal for you? Like, do you gain weight like over the course of this? Like, like how does that work with the diet and maybe the conditioning like kind of changes? Like, how exactly does that typically go for you?
Yeah, I feel like it was just a big, workout change. And like last August, same as this August, I'm getting my own 2 days in with the strength staff, walking a mile on the treadmill, on the salt bike. That's horrible. But it's just a change of working out, and I got to do a better job at watching what I eat off of how many calories I'm burning throughout the day.
What's the toughest food to lay off of?
I'm a pasta guy, man. I'm a pasta guy.
What's your
Yeah.
favorite kind of pasta?
Chicken Alfredo.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be a tough one to kind of kick back. But is there like a food that you've picked up that you're like, you know what, this isn't the worst thing in the world, and being able to to kind of eat more of this kind of gives me an excuse, or is it like, yeah, you know what, we're actually keeping it, pretty tight with the nutrition program, all that stuff?
No, we keeping it pretty tight. I got a NIL deal with Jack Nutrition, uh, prep meal place out here in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky. They do a great job, and they got a variety of things.
So I was going back to your high school stuff. Did you think you were going to play offensive tackle in college? Was that kind of the reason that you were playing both ways? That was never an option
Not
for
at
you?
all. Not at all. I was playing both ways because I had the best feet, one of the best feet on the team. A couple schools wanted me for O tackle. Got the perfect size and frame, but I knew in my heart and in my head I wanted to play D tackle.
What was that experience like playing both ways? Because it seemed like you would probably just be gassed by the end of the game doing that. Like at that size, that's just, I know it's like, well, it's one thing to do it when you're like a sophomore in high school, but to do it competitively, to do it like, a bigger school, I imagine that decision was probably a difficult one. And there were probably moments where you're like, man, it'd be nice to just be able to focus on one thing.
Yeah, it was fun, just playing with my guys. I didn't even really see that I was gassed because the next play was coming up so quick. And I feel like it helped me a lot to get prepared for college, just to get my motor started, get my conditioning up. So I feel like I had a great transition.
You told me that you would throw down some nasty dunks. One, like you do like the 180 two-handed slam, like that's like the most athletic thing that you've been able to do. You played center on your team at Cass Tech. When Calipari was at Kentucky, did he ever say like, Deone, look, I know we typically, we look a little bit bigger. We're going for like 6'8", 6'9", you're gonna be playing in the post. But was he ever like, hey, Deone, like, come on, like get some run. Let's see what you could do.
I wanted to, man. I was waiting for the text. And I'm on Mark Pope head too. I wanna get a little tryout in. I got it.
What would your game be like? Because are you like Charles Barkley at this point? Because you're 6'6", but at the same time, like, with all due respect, you should be playing in the post. You should be shooting threes, I would think.
Yeah, I got everything on my bag. In high school, I was really my senior year, I was really our facilitator. Catch the ball at the top of the key, run the offense. So I got some tricks up my sleeve. Let's just say that.
Okay, so you were like a Jokic in high school?
Man, I was doing everything.
What was the like best game that you had in high school? Like the game that you look back on and you're like, all right, I filled up the stat sheet. I felt pretty unstoppable.
Uh, I'll say it was our basketball homecoming game against Renaissance, another big high school out of Detroit. I had like double digit boards, like 6 or 7 assists, and like 10 points.
That's filling up the stat sheet. That's a Jokic stat line. Yeah, very, very much. Can you explain what it's like to be recruited by Nick Saban or Kirby Smart? Because I know you didn't end up there, obviously, but is there a story from getting recruited by one of those guys that kind of stood out?
Not really a story, but it's a great honor to get recruited by Nick Saban. He's the most respected head coach in the country. So it just felt great. I don't really have any stories. I've only been there, or only been to Alabama like once for a camp, and but it was a great camp. I was tired, but it was a great camp.
Those camps seem really intense. They're like, we're gonna weed these guys out like as like sophomores or juniors, whatever it is. I know they change that stuff all the time. Like, did you notice a difference like going to all those camps where you're like, man, some of these are just crazy difficult, and this would probably be how it'd be if I signed up to play here.
Um, yeah, I noticed different. Like every place is different, but Alabama, so we was barrel rolling, forward, backwards roll, and that was just a warm up.
Lord. Michigan wasn't a finalist for you. I saw, even though they gave you your first offer. It's the big in-state school. What's that like growing up, where you probably hear about Michigan. You can't go anywhere without hearing about Michigan.
Yeah.
Why did that maybe not appeal to you as much? Because I think oftentimes if you're turning down the in-state school, it's you know what, they kind of came on to me late. They didn't really show that interest in me. But if they were kind of coming on to you early, like what was kind of the relationship like with them?
Yeah, it was a great relationship, you know. I got a bunch of old teammates at the University of Michigan, you know, Raheem Anderson. I got a bunch of friends that go there. I just feel like it wasn't the place for me. If I could go back and do it again, Kentucky would be my first choice again.
Harbaugh come into your lunchroom and just be like, Dion, what are we doing here? Like that anything like that ever happen?
A few times, yeah.
All right, tell me about that because the Harbaugh recruiting stories, we've seen the stuff that goes viral, and when he jumps into a pool to be able to sign a kicker or whatever that was, the sleepovers and all that's like, but what's it like actually seeing him like walking in your high school and be like, all right, this guy's, as the kids say, he's got an aura about him.
Yeah, you know, he's like a celebrity in Detroit, you know. He's a great coach. Um, I remember the first time he walked in, it was, I want to say my junior year, and I just got put onto, I was in my lunch period. I was chilling, eating. I looked back, I had to like double take. And then I get a phone call from my head coach like, hey, you just looked at us. Come over here. Coach Harbaugh want to talk to you. Man, I had butterflies in my stomach.
And of course, Harbaugh probably like criticized what you were eating for lunch. He's like, "Oh, is that like chicken or something like that?" He's got like, "Why aren't you drinking like the tallest glass of milk you could probably find with his weird toothpaste?" All that stuff. Yeah, look, I think it's always fascinating for the out of state guys that end up at Kentucky because we always talk all the time about like Stoops' presence in the Midwest and like why he recruits so effectively to that specific area. When did you know Kentucky's the place for me? This is where I want to end up. I think I have a path to become everything I want to be and then some.
Um, I really didn't know until like that night of like before early signing day. Um, I had conversations with Coach Harbaugh, Coach Stoops. Um, then my dad asked me what I was gonna do. I didn't. I really had no idea because they were my top two, you know. Then I prayed that night, asked God, like, hey, show me where you want me to go. Then not even 5 minutes later, Coach Stoops called me again. And I'm like, okay, I got you.
Does take me through what that process is like of getting to know him because I think he's kind of wired a little bit like a throwback guy. And for some people, maybe it's not their thing and he can rub you the wrong way. And then for others, it's like, yeah, I mean, I want to go to bat for this guy. And I know you talked about like, you've already talked about like the Texas A&M stuff and all that, like how you called him right away and you're like, hey, what's up? Like just be real with me. Just let me know what's up, what's going on. Cause I'm seeing all this stuff on the internet. But like what has your relationship been like with Stoops these last few years?
It's a great relationship. He's like the uncle that I always needed but never asked for, you know. I can call him about anything. He's going to be an open ear. He doesn't care who you are, where you came from. He's going to treat you the same. And he is an old school coach. Like he would have us out there for 10 hours if he could, you know. So, but as long as we get our work done, he's the nicest guy in the world.
I know you're a fan of NIL. It's something that's benefited you, but you also, have talked about how you think it's something that has maybe made too many guys commit to the wrong places. If you could make changes to NIL based on your experiences so far with it, what would those changes look like to just the system as a whole?
Yeah. I never really thought about that, but my number one is the guys that's loyal to me. Like no freshman come in and get money, you know, because if I offer you 100 or 50 to 100, and then this other school offer you 200, you're not mature enough to know who has more loyalty. So you're going to go to the higher number, you know, to where our third and fourth year guys that's really already bought in, put in the work, and have flashed on the camera in the SEC, they, they're living good.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you step into a situation where you're playing right away and you're earning that in a much different way than probably most true freshmen are. Most true freshmen, it's like, yeah, I mean, you could be getting NIL money for this, this, and this, but you're not even on the traveling roster and you're still figuring out like how in the world to get to class and do all these different things. Did you feel how much did you feel right away? Because you enrolled like you weren't an early enrollee either. Like when you
No.
get to campus and you start playing and you realize like, oh, I can do this effectively at this level, even though I wasn't some top 50 recruit or anything like that. Like how quickly did your perspective change of, oh my gosh, like I actually belong here?
I say it was like I knew that I belonged there. I knew that I belonged here. I'm not. I don't like to be like I'm a humble person. I don't like to be like outgoing, cocky, but I know what I can do. I know how I was brought up. I'm not going to get into any trouble. You know, I promised my mom that, hey, if I went out of state for classes or for school, she wouldn't have to worry about my grades again. And the football part, that's all on me. You know, it's all about my work ethic. I love my high school defensive line coach, Coach Nick Martin. He really instilled that in me and showed me like nobody's going to give it to you, so you got to go and take it.
Tell me what's been the most surreal thing about these last 2 years because it really has been 2 years since you arrived on campus and now to be seeing yourself all these mock drafts and stuff like that and preseason All-American and you could say yeah I just try and block out the noise and everything that's all well and good but I imagine there's been a moment or two where you've looked up and been like dang this happened so quickly.
Yeah, I look back and I miss those days. I miss those days where I was just coming in with the rest of my freshman class. We all in each other rooms, laughing, playing the game. But it has felt so surreal. Just having to come up, be a leader, be a captain so quick. I feel like that's like the most surreal moment because now looking back, I was a captain team captain at 19 in the school in the SEC. So it's just it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
It's really rare. And I feel like I've been talking about guys that can do that. Like a Harold Perkins is in that spot. Nick Scorton is someone that was doing that last year. And it is amazing to think about being 19 years old and have all that responsibility. Speaking of responsibility, coverage responsibilities. That's maybe my favorite thing to talk about with you. Last year, the Florida play, where you drop back into coverage, you force the interception. Can you take me through that? Because that is still one of the most impressive things I think I've seen from a defensive lineman at the college level.
Hey, all I remember is Coach White telling me, if it's a pass, drop a five, get big, and kill somebody. I had to.
Does that come up in pregame? Like, are you or do you know that that's in part of the game plan that there's going to be one of those opportunities waiting for you? Because you guys didn't you call that? Isn't the play for you to drop back like that called Gator? So I imagine that was like you knew on Wednesday that was going to happen.
Man, I knew he put it in, but he was like, I don't know if we're gonna run it, but if we do, it's your chance. And we ran it a couple times in practice. So he saw that I got the feel for it. The footwork was good. So he really just said, F it.
I think your coverage grade on PFF is like a 99 as a result of that. I think you only ended up playing three
Sure.
coverage snaps. That's all that matters. How do you not say after that, like, Coach Stoops, come on, just give me one a week. Just give me one a week to be able to do this. You had to be banging the drum to be able to do that the rest of the season.
Yeah, I was begging. And then I was begging for the ball. Hey, I'm a skill position now.
It's unbelievable. That play for those who haven't seen it, go back and watch it. Florida fans probably remember it all too well. This has been great, man. I really appreciate the time. I want to get you out of here on a little bit of rapid fire. Just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work for you?
hmm
All right, first one. Got to be near and dear to your heart. Detroit style pizza, overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
Properly rated. Properly.
I'm stunned you didn't say underrated because I'm a Chicago suburbs native and I think it's underrated. Like I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it could like you got to be in the mood for it though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Not everyday pizza, but like, like I
Yeah.
say with deep dish, it's like holiday pizza,
Yeah.
there's a place for that, definitely. Okay, speaking of food, what is your go-to post-game meal?
Um, what time was the game?
Ooh, that's a good question. How about I can't say 3:30 on CBS anymore. That brings a little tear to my eye. I hate that. Let's talk okay, let's just say noon game. Let's say a
Okay.
noon game and anything is on the table. You're eating at like 4 or 5 o'clock, whenever that is.
Okay. Probably probably a Chipotle bowl or some tropical smoothie.
Okay. Chipotle
Yeah.
order. What are you
Ooh.
going? Do you go double meat? Is that the default?
Yeah. White rice, double chicken, no beans, queso, sour cream, guac, and veggies.
That's a good order. And bowl,
Yeah.
not burrito, because the burrito falls apart, then ends up being a bowl anyways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You're a good person to ask this to because you're originally from the Midwest. What do you think is the perfect football weather?
Ooh. I say me being, yeah, okay. Mid 70s.
Okay, so everybody from like your area, I feel like that I talked to is like, no, it's gotta be like below freezing. It's got, you gotta be out there just like, full winter jacket and stuff like that. That's why you came to the SEC right there.
Yeah, hey, you got to do what you got to do, but I don't really mess with the cold, man.
I don't blame you. I don't want to be uncomfortable at a game like that. Okay, what's your favorite thing to do on a football field?
Favorite thing to do like mid game?
It can be, how about your favorite thing to do post snap? So it can be stuff a run, it can be rush the passer, it can be drop into coverage, whatever.
I'll say stuff to run on the 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. Ain't a better feeling than that.
There was the one against Clemson too that I think it was like 3rd and 2 or something like that. That was a pretty big, yeah, that was, it looks like you were having fun, is what I was saying.
Yeah.
All right, last one for you. I ranked you number 5 among my best SEC players returning for this upcoming season. Did I disrespect you?
Of course.
All right, where should I put you?
I'm confident, bro. I feel like top 2, top 3. I'll give you top 3.
Okay, who would have been ahead of you?
Top 3. No, I'm number 1, but like, top 3. But we got a bunch of guys in the SEC, uh, even just, we got James Pierce, we got Luther Burden, we got even Walter Nolan, we even got Maxwell that's right downstairs. He better be top 10, man.
All right, we'll save that
Uh,
discussion. We'll save that discussion for off air. We'll save that. Yeah, look, hey, a couple of those. I mean, Luther Burden was one. I had Pierce. I had Pierce at 3. Will Campbell, I had at 2, and then I put Harold Perkins at 4. So those are the guys ahead of you. Not slouches, in my opinion.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
respectable.
I feel like, yeah. Hey, we just got some work to do.
Exactly, exactly. Hey, this is preseason. This could be number 1 by season's end. The season's end stuff that matters a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, this has been awesome, man. Really appreciate the time. Looking forward to watching this year.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, before we get to a quick Jersey story I had from over the weekend, quick cleanup. Montreal Johnson, by the way, I should have mentioned before. I don't know why I spaced on this. It's been an eventful few days. Has the injury week to week that he's going to be out. Not as serious as a CJ Baxter thing, but for those who are wondering, why didn't we bring that up when we were discussing him as leading rusher? Honestly, just spaced, just spaced, just totally spaced on that. But hopefully, he is going to be back for the start of the season after having arthroscopic knee surgery. So wanted to clean that up as well. All right. Jersey story. So for those who have been listening, maybe if you don't listen to the pod throughout the offseason, but I talked about this a couple of months ago. I lost my cousin tragically, who I was really, really close to, he would have been turning 40 this month. And I've been, at multiple funerals for it because they had a funeral in Florida. They had a funeral in Chicago. This weekend I was in Chicago more so for fun than I was. We had the funeral in Chicago a month earlier, but I got to see my Aunt Jean, which was great, and it was awesome. But my cousin had this massive jersey collection. I think he had 52 jerseys that he had. And he's a big dude. Cousin was like 6'3", 6'4", like 240 pounds, like big guy, really big guy. And so all these jerseys are like double XL, triple XL. So I'm not like looking at these jerseys as if I'm going to be able to fit into one of them anytime soon or anything like that. So my aunt told us, hey, I want you and Ryan, my brother, to be able to pick out a jersey. She's like, I don't want to like deal with selling all these and stuff. I just want his friends to have this and like to have it be like a memento of like who Pat was and stuff like that. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like when I'm in town, like I'll pick one out, I'll bring one home. It'll be a nice little way to be able to remember my cousin. And so my aunt, like she had showed me all these jerseys or whatever, and he's got like a bunch of old Bears jerseys and stuff. He's got like Singletary and Ditka, and like he's got typical. He was like a big Jordan brand guy. He would wear like UNC stuff as a result of that, like So he has all these jerseys, and none of them had like really like stood out to me. And then I kind of thought about something else, and I picked a Travis Kelce jersey. Why did I pick a Travis Kelce jersey? Is it because he's dating Taylor Swift? No. My aunt had told me 2 months ago, before my cousin died, she says to me, like, hey, I really missed being in the family fantasy football league. And this was the first year that she wasn't in it. She's like, I really missed not being in it. If someone drops out of this league that my brother organizes, he's the commissioner, let me know. And I'm like, perfect. Absolutely. Would love to. And a week after that, my cousin dies. My cousin was a big part of our fantasy football league, drove conversation, engaged with everyone, was a huge part of this. And so at my cousin's funeral, I had like some downtime with my aunt that we were talking. I said, a month ago, you told me if someone drops out of this league, let me know. I'm like, well, she's like, oh my God, like I didn't even realize that. And she like breaks down, crying, and she's emotional. And it ends up being this like kind of happy moment. It's like she's going to come back into our fantasy league. She's going to take the place of Pat. And so how this connects to the jersey is she said, the only jersey that I want of his is the Pat Mahomes jersey. And I only want the Pat Mahomes jersey because I would pick Pat Mahomes way too early in the draft every single year. And then Pat would always call me and give me crap for it every single time. And she would. And I remember this, like, the person in your, like, if you're doing like a snake draft fantasy, like I know we're kind of in the midst of snake draft fantasy football, like that person that just takes a quarterback so early. And she was that person. And so I thought to myself, it'd be kind of nice to think about if I know that she has the Mahomes jersey and if I have the Kelce jersey. And it's kind of a nice way to like connect us because none of those other jerseys made me feel like, like a Jordan jersey would have been kind of cool, I guess. But like that's kind of a nice little tie in to that. And so that's always going to make me think of Pat. So our fantasy football champ, we decided in honor of him, we're going to get a custom jersey of him, like a Bears jersey with like a patch that we can put on it every single year, have people chip in and just find it as a way to remember him. I miss him like crazy. It's been a really hard summer dealing with that. And it was a nice moment to be able to kind of share with my aunts after just a very eventful weekend that we had in Chicago.
Man, your whole life is like a hallmark. Every story you told me is like the cutest story. Oh, I'm trying to like hold back emotions right now. Wow. That's a cool story, man. See, that's why this stuff matters. That's why the people that are losers, they're just like, you're an adult, why are you wearing a jersey? It's like, no, it means things to people. It's not just the jersey. It's not the cool adult pajamas we get to wear. It's the fact that it signifies something. That's really, really cool, man.
Exactly. I figured, you know what? Happy to add that one to my closet. I know I've talked about like giving away jerseys and stuff like that, but I figured, you know what? That one's now going to have sentimental value to me moving forward. TBD if I'm going to do what I did with the Saquon jersey and get like it custom fitted and all that stuff.
The
like,
tailored?
Yeah, the tailored thing. I don't know. We'll see. It was kind of a lot of work for a jersey that I haven't really worn that much, but who knows? Maybe if we have another jersey contest a few years down the road, maybe I'm going to have to bust that one out and actually get it to fit me because it does not. It is a dress. It's got the Super Bowl patch from the most recent Super Bowl though, so it's legit. It's very nice. So please, if you have a jersey story, send one to me, COGARA@SaturdayDownSouth.com. Would love to share those periodically as we get those. If you got a story like that stands out, love to be able to talk about that on this show. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at SatDownSouth, at CJ Rivera, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.